this is the best team can go. So hopefully we'll do well.
Heinrich Hausler's become the new leader of the Tour of Qatar cycle race after winning Wednesday's third stage. The German-born Australian battled through strong winds and sprinted to the line to win his second stage of this year's race. Tom Boonen, who had a 1-second advantage in the overall standings at the start of the day, got a puncture 40 kilometres from the finish and wasn't able to rejoin the lead group. He's now down in 14th. But Hausler, who takes the leader's golden jersey, has a 4-second advantage over his compatriot, Mark Renshaw. And just to update you on that match between Argentina and Portugal, Messi scored a penalty, so they win 2-1. He scored that in the 90th minute. Unbelievable. Adrian, back to you.
Wow, talk about a last-minute winner. Many thanks indeed, Louise. That's it for this news hour on Al Jazeera. Thanks for being with us. Stay here. Stay with us, rather. Doreen has the latest in just a moment.
We have more flooding to come across northern Australia over the next couple of days. I suspect the main focus for the heaviest rainfall will be just around the northernmost parts of Queensland, pushing up into the Gulf of Carpentaria, just around the Cape York Peninsula. Plenty of shower clouds showing up here, and you can see this long chain of clouds just running through central parts down into South Australia. Heavy showers are going to persist here. Could even see some very wet weather coming towards Alice Springs. Temperatures here at around 34 Celsius. Showers or longer spells of rain pulling away from Western Australia. Still nowhere near the bushfires that we've seen earlier on this week. And notice some rather heavy rain very close to the northwest. Hopefully that should stay offshore. Brighter skies gradually pushing back in as we move towards the weekend. That wet weather will make its way down towards western parts of South Australia. Heavy showers making their way into the southeast as this rain just pushes high pressure out of the way, nudges down across Victoria. Same area of cloud and rain will bring some heavy downpours into southern parts of New Zealand over the next day or two. I think these will gradually make their way a little further northwards. Hopefully a window of drier, brighter weather to come for Friday. Temperatures in Auckland getting up to a pleasant 23 Celsius. Meanwhile, it's not looking too bad across Southeast Asia. Still a few showers into Indonesia, yes, but largely fine and dry for Western Borneo and right the way across Malaysia.
As Washington's allies stumble one after the other, exposed, losing control and influence, powerless in the face of the people's power, we ask, is this the dawn of a new Middle East? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.
Opposition leaders hold talks with the Mubarak government, but with protesters refusing to leave Tahrir Square, have Mubarak's concessions done anything to accelerate the change and bring about the orderly transition of power Western governments talk about?
The Egyptian people want freedom.
An Al Jazeera news special.
Demonstrators remain defiant and non-worker walkouts contribute to the wave of discontent in Egypt. I'm Darine Aboughaida. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. More later from Egypt, including put him on trial now. Italian prosecutors call for immediate action against Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. Pakistan-U.S. relations remain strained over the detention of an American citizen. And easing the embargo, a loosening of U.S. restrictions on Cuba divides expat opinion in Florida. Well, it's midnight in Egypt and protesters remain camped out on the streets of Cairo, but the fact that workers are on strike across the country may be a more worrying development for the government. Behind the scenes, negotiations are underway between a committee of wise men and the government to agree on a transition. But despite those talks, the deadlock between the government and the protesters looks set to continue. Here is Ayman Muhyiddin.
Well, the political standoff between President Hosni Mubarak's government and the so-called Committee of the Wise Men continues without any progress, really. The so-called Committee of the Wise Men has put forth their demands, which are also representative of some of the protesters' demands that President Hosni Mubarak step down and transfer power to Vice President Omar Suleiman to begin implementing constitutional reforms. But the president seems to be very much entrenched into holding on to power, at least until the end of his term in September. Many feel that is an attempt by the regime to consolidate its grip on power, and many simply feel they are just empty and false promises. They've seen promises about reform made in the past without being substantiated, and they fear this could possibly happen now. For his part, though, the belief is that if the president were to step down for any reason, he would transfer power to the speakers of the Egyptian parliament, and in that case, he would be forced, the speaker of the parliament would be forced to carry out elections in 60 days under the current constitution, and by many people's assessment, the current constitution is rigged in a way that it would favor the ruling National Democratic Party, because they would be the only ones allowed to nominate a candidate, and therefore the opposition parties would not be allowed to nominate any presidential candidates. So many are describing that really the ace in the president's back pocket, which is not allowing him to step down, and it's certainly something that is being used to back or push back the demands of the protesters and the opposition, saying it would lead to a bit of political vacuum and chaos without bringing the much-needed reforms that the protesters and other members of Egypt's opposition are demanding. Now, all of this is happening as the protesters continue in Liberation Square, with some of them moving closer to the symbolic heart of Cairo at the Parliament building. There's a sit-in taking place there that is lasting throughout the course of the evening. And all of this against the backdrop of some very interesting developments with Egypt's labor force. Thousands of workers representing different sectors and industry have gone on strike, and it's a momentum that many of the protesters say will add to their cause for President Hosni Mubarak to step down. Whether or not these labor strikes continue to grow in the coming days will be watched very closely, because they represent a very important element of Egyptian society and could widen and increase perhaps the pressure against Hosni Mubarak to step down.
Elsewhere in the country, 3 protesters have died and about 100 people wounded in clashes with police in the western province of New Valley. Anti-Mubarak demonstrations started on Monday night, and several people were also injured and were taken to hospital. Reports say that it was the first serious clashes in the province since the 28th of January, when a day of wrath was observed. Well, the role of the country's armed forces has been in the spotlight ever since protests in Egypt began late last month. The military has, by and large, stood on the sidelines as protests spread across the country. But will it continue to do so in the future? The Vice President, Omar Suleiman, he's warned of a possible coup by the army if protests continue indefinitely. Well, soldiers out on the streets of Egypt were welcomed by protesters early on. Some suggested it could convince some of them to go home. Generals did call on the demonstrators to end their agitation, but that didn't happen. Others say it won't go against one of its own. President Mubarak is, of course, a decorated military man, and soldiers stood by while pro- and anti-Mubarak protesters clashed in central Cairo, and that was last week. Issam El Arian is a spokesman and a senior leader for the banned opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood, and he dismisses any talk of a coup by the army.
It is a strange situation. Egyptian people are asking for real democracy. And the vice president said that the Egyptian people are not ready for democracy. Egyptian people need a civil state, democratic state. And the vice president is threatened by a coup d'etat, military coup d'etat. That is not that suitable time for military intervention all over the world. It is something historical now that the military can take power in any country. Egypt is not easy. And I think the Egyptian people are not going to face the military and not going to face the army. And also the army is a part of this population, part of this society. The men of the soldiers and officers in the party cannot go to this way. This is a false threat. It is something also vocal which can make some serving some time for taking this for the regime. It is clear that now the regime wants to exist in power for 6 months and he is maybe bugging that the people can lose hope or the people can get fatigued.
In other news, the Italian Prime Minister says an attempt by federal prosecutors to put him on trial is a bid to topple his government. Silvio Berlusconi faces allegations of paying for sex with a 17-year-old Moroccan dancer and then using his political power to cover it up. Lawrence Lee has more.
He may be one of the great survivors, but there's no doubting Silvio Berlusconi has reason to worry. Even given his ability to hold on to power despite all kinds of allegations of financial or personal impropriety in the past, there now appears to be so much evidence linking him firstly to a young showgirl known as Ruby and then to sex games known as bunga bunga parties that prosecutors believe they've got enough against him to have a criminal trial straight away. Like everything to do with Berlusconi, this case has split Italy, this time apparently with the young saying he deserves everything he gets, but older people prepared to forgive the aging politician.
This is absolutely just. I think it's incredible that people still don't understand what kind of person he is. He must start paying the price for what he's done.
The best thing would be for Berlusconi to resign and then a transitional government to come in to work on electoral law.
Well, he loves what he does. He should just do it a bit more cleverly, like many others do.
Berlusconi's been lucky in that his opponents have been unable to capitalise on his problems in the past. Now, though, they smell blood.
We want the judges to make the truth come out, and we want him to go to trial. That's the only thing we ask. Then, if he's innocent, God bless him, and in a couple of weeks, we will know the truth.
Still, you don't get to hold on to power for as long as Berlusconi has without being able to face down unpleasant allegations. And so the obvious response has been to claim a smear campaign.
It's just embarrassing. It's disgusting and shameful. The thing about these trials is that they're false trials. The accusations are completely without proof. Everyone knows that they're just about a negative media campaign.
No doubt many people, not just in Italy, view Berlusconi as a misogynist and political dinosaur. All the same, he's been in court before. It'd be unwise to write him off just yet. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Former Liberian President Charles Taylor has boycotted